Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to show you this because this is just incredibly impressive. Elon Musk essentially made Twitter, which was on pace to losing $1 billion in 2022, within 5 weeks, made the adjustments necessary to be profitable. Now, he did this by taking a page out of the small business owner's playbook because when you don't have resources to borrow more money, you got to make cuts. You got to make changes. So I want to start with a Twitter Spaces clip of Elon Musk being interviewed about the financials and the changes he made and why he had to make them in a very short period of time in 5 weeks. So listen to this.
Because of the nature of this transaction, where there's $12.5 billion of debt and the Fed rate has been going crazy, there's on the order of $1.5 billion ish of debt servicing that's required. So we're talking about like net cash outflow if you didn't make any changes of on the order of like $6.5 billion next year, with revenue probably tracking to $3 billion. So that's like a negative cash flow situation of $3 billion a year. Not good. Since Twitter has $1 billion in cash. So that's why I spent the last 5 weeks cutting costs like crazy.
Now, some of the highlights that he said, he's got $1.5 billion of debt service. He has $13.5 billion of debt that he borrowed to pay for Twitter. $6.5 billion net cash out next year if he did not change a thing, did not make any cuts. And he said on pace for $3 million in revenue next year. So the numbers just don't add up, especially when he said he had $1 billion in cash on Twitter. And he's not the type of guy that's going to just continue to allow his money to be burned. So he makes changes and he makes them quick. And that's what small business owners have to do. Let me show you some of the financials. So basically what I did for 2022, I created a small summarized profit and loss for 2022. And all I did was I took the public financials for the first half of the year. We had the first 6 months of Twitter. And all I did is I took all of the financials from the profit and loss and I doubled them to kind of get an idea. What would 2022, if it stayed on that same pace, what would it look like? So if we just continued on that pace, and I'm just going to take out one thing, and that's the debt service because that number doesn't count. But as you can see, on pace for losing about almost $943 million, 0.9 of a billion, almost $1 billion lost. Now I'm going to bring back debt service because for 2023, I'm making some assumptions here on how the debt service works. Now, if he purchased it and everything else remained the same, and as he had mentioned, he borrowed $12.5 billion, and I'm going to go with a current rate of about 6.5%, he'd be paying interest of $812 million on that alone. Now, if we were to take it for half a year, that's half of that is 406. And by the way, these are all in thousands. And if we add some principal payment, because he said he's paying 1.5 billion a year, half of 1.5 is 750,000. So if you combine the interest on the debt and the debt service, he'd be burning about 1.7 billion. Now, what he said was that they were on track for 3 million in revenue. Now, if that were the case, which isn't what I see here on the financials, what I see here is that revenue through the first 6 months is 2.3 million. Now, he may be thinking or may know that there's been a significant drop off in advertising services. And if that were the case and everything else remained the same, and we were to just bring it now to 3 million, at the 2.5, so our total is 3, he would be losing that $3 billion that he was talking about. It's not sustainable. He can't do it. It's not going to work. So he had to make changes. And again, this is what small business owners have to do. You got to cut because you don't have this unlimited resource of cash. So what did he do? He cut his research and development, his sales and marketing, and general and administrative. Now, when I looked at the financials, they don't break out the expenses so that you know how much is labor for research and development, for sales, and for general and administrative. What it says in the notes is that a significant portion is labor. So you can define significant any way you want. I'm defining significant is that every line item of expense for research and development, sales and marketing, general administrative, 85% is labor. That's how I defined it. I may be wrong. Now, the layoffs were deep, and we're talking a 67% layoff. Now, where did I get that information? Bloomberg report said that roughly 5,000 of Twitter's 7,500 employees have left the company since Musk assumed control. So they're 67%. 67% of all of the employees are gone. Now, if we were to take this information, and again, I assume that 85% of the expense line items are labor, and then we cut 67%, then in R&D, he's cut 941 million. In sales and marketing, he cut 700 million, and in G&A, he cut another 400 million. Now, what does that look like on our financials? Well, if we open it up, 2023, if advertising were to remain on pace and data licensing were to remain the same as what it was on pace for last year. Now I'm gonna make blue verified 0 right now. If I do that and we take a look at where we're at, and now the research and development is cut, sales and marketing is cut by 67%. All these are cut by 67%. Total year of interest, they would have a net income of about $300 million. Debt service, let's assume it's another 687,000. So the combined is that 1.5 billion that he's talking about, that he mentioned in Twitter Spaces. There'd be a loss of about 400 million. Now, this blue verified, you may be familiar with it, but this is something that he is now selling. Blue verified, and it's $8 a month, which, by the way, has changed, but it started at $8 a month. And ironically, do you notice that it ends up being for 12 months, $96, which is his two favorite numbers flipped around. But let's assume there's a number of users stayed the same as they were stated in the final report that we had, the final public report that we had, at 329 million. And let's say that 1% of all of the users actually purchase Blue Verify. $315 million. That 315 added to the revenue. Everything else remained the same. 611 million in profit. Debt service 687 for the principal on the debt service. Interest is 812. So he's essentially very little, not very little, I guess that's all relative, 75 million, but very little in terms for Elon, a burn on Twitter. Now, what I believe is that, first of all, what I know is that Twitter verified is no longer $8 a month. I know it's $11 a month. So if we take 11 and multiply that by 12, now we're talking about 132. So that's 434,000, 434 million. Sorry. So if we were to do that, notice that, look at that, that $11, 1%. Now he is cash flow positive. Nice job, Elon. Nice job. And take a look at what you can do with this. So this is what I believe is pretty much in line with what's happening. Let's take a look at 2024. Now let's assume after, he finally has some time to get his arms around everything. And let's say there's a 10% growth on revenue for uh, advertising services and for data licensing. Or just advertising services. Data licensing, not entirely sure what all that is. So I'm just going to leave that. But just let's say it's advertising services. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna include that too. Do a little quick audible here. Okay, so we're going to go up 10% for data licensing, 10% for advertising. Blue verified. Let's assume, I'm going to make an assumption here that blue verified, if we jump over to 2024, let's assume blue verified goes to 3% from 1%. So now people see the value in it and they've increased by 3%. So not a significant amount added at 3%. That's another 1.3 billion. Now he's at 6.5. And again, let's assume that all of his expenses rise at 10%, just like everything else. His labor is growing at 10%. Everything else remain similar. Now he's $2 billion in net income after he pays his debt service. 1.2 billion of cash. All of a sudden, it is generating cash pretty significantly. And you could just see that if he stays on that pace, I know he'll probably make other adjustments, other revenue sources. It's going to just really take off. So taking a page out of small business owners page book or playbook. I mean, it's as simple as that. This is what small business owners need to do. They need to be quick. They got to pivot. They got to make changes. He's doing that. Twitter is going to be around for a long time. Great job, Elon Musk. And glad to see you as part of a small business owner minded person now. Everybody take care. Happy New Year. Make it a great one.